So it's not something people are normally climbing up that ridge. It's very spiky and very rocky. And so just a couple of weeks ago, Jackson said, I want to climb the ridge. There have been people that have had dangerous experiences on that ridge. So inside I'm like, okay, I'm feeling some uncertainty here, but I want to be a creative collaborator. So I said, tell me what your plan would be.
So much character development.
My gosh, character development, self-motivation, and then this self-trust idea that like, okay, my mom is saying words that means she trusts me, right? When I said, you're in charge, let me be a helper. That is the opposite of what a lot of modern Western parenting is, which is, oh, don't do that. That's not safe. That's going to be too expensive. That's too much, right?
What I think is really amazing about kids is they're so fearless. They just don't know fear until we teach them to be afraid.
What if I told you that a story could teach your child more history, science, math, and literature than a year of textbooks? Welcome to the Story Schooling Podcast. I'm Angel Selden, author of Curiouser.
And I'm Sandy Fouts, co-founder of Wonderwell Learning.
Today we're talking with Shara Jackson Harper. Shara will be sharing a few stories that exemplify this principle. Everything is a win when the goal is experience, not results. Shara is a mental health therapist specializing in women's health, and she homeschooled her kids until the oldest was 14. And now they all attend public school, a charter school. So Shara, can you tell us a little more about your homeschool experience and your career experience and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, I would say it's really interesting because when you say homeschool experience and career, I feel like there's a lot of overlap in my choice to homeschool early on and the things that I've been involved with. So when I was living in Minnesota, I had 3 little kids and I decided to become a birth doula after having really positive experiences with birth doulas. And so I did the training to become a birth doula, and then I did the training to become a childbirth educator and a postpartum educator. And so I was kind of in this world of thinking a little bit differently about how I wanted to do things, thinking about a more holistic and maybe like whole person centered experience. And it kind of that feeling and that drive to look for other options outside of maybe what I grew up with or what maybe was standard in some areas really encouraged me to also consider what kind of education I wanted for my kids. My 3 oldest are really close in age. So I had these 3 people and we were doing experiments and going on field trips and spending time in nature. And then it was time to register for school. And I found a really darling Montessori that was accessible because it was lottery based. And I thought, okay, this would be perfect. And I really loved the model. And then I started learning a little bit more about the possibilities in homeschool. And one of the things that really opened my brain was attending a conference that you held, Angel, and Sandy, you spoke at too. Both of you spoke. And it opened my mind to the idea that this really can look many different ways. There's not one way to do it. Kind of like this idea of the goal is the experience, not a specific outcome, but like what is the experience that your family wants to have. And so we started, it was probably 2 weeks before my oldest would have started kindergarten that I officially decided, no, I'm just gonna try something different. And I gave myself permission, like, try this for a year and see what happens. And then I completely fell in love with so many parts. And for me, the most important part was just this idea to be these kind of creative processes together, dependent on their interest and dependent on their questions, and just allowing their natural curiosity, which is, I mean, outrageously insightful, and their own inner knowing, right? That I could follow their own inner knowing into what they were interested in. So we started homeschooling. At that time, we homeschooled in Minnesota, and then we homeschooled in Michigan, and we homeschooled a little bit when we moved to Utah. And so I loved homeschooling, and then I kept working more with women in the birth space, and I realized that I was limited in how I could support people when they were in that messy middle part of life transitions and growth and kind of these places of that culturally we're not very good at supporting. And so I decided to go back to school as an older mom to become a mental health therapist and specialize in women's issues and specialize really in like that growth and transformation experience. And so when I was going back to school full time, it was an in-person program and I needed to figure out what to do with our education plan. And so with a lot of hope and inquisition for all the homeschool friends that I made in my new area, what schools make sense to transition kids to, and there was a few different options, and kind of let the kids help me fill that out for things that they were interested in. And so they've been in a public charter school setting, both my little elementary kids and my teens, just since 2020. So just a few years now, but everybody's kind of settled in. And now I finished school and finished a couple of internships, and I work at a practice seeing, a variety. I work a lot with women, but I work with men and couples and families and teens, and the work of really witnessing growth and expansion and self-trust it feels like a very sacred space for me, and reminds me of what it was like in the doula space, and also reminds me of that sacred like learning growth experience in homeschool as well.
Beautiful. I love how you talk about how there's just so much overlap with everything. Like there's really a oneness to all of this, but most Americans and I suppose industrialized nations tend to compartmentalize their lives.
Yeah.
But you see the connection between all of this. When you say everything is a win when the goal is experience, not results, what do you mean by win? How do you define win?
Yes. So I do think maybe that word is a little bit tricky because we do culturally define win as something that is expected to some level of success, that some is predetermined. A win is usually a predetermined outcome, right? If we're playing a game, we know what win means. And so that word is a little bit tricky here, I want to acknowledge, but what the win for our kids, the win for all humans is self-awareness. That's the win. The win is, can I know myself and can I act in accordance to how I know myself to be? And when that's off, can I make adjustments? That's the win. And so we're not looking for a specific outcome necessarily, except if that outcome is alignment.
I love that. And you've said that you can accomplish this better by shifting how you think of your role. So I've always used in the past that I'm a facilitator, I'm a guide, I'm a mentor. I have shied away from using the word teacher because that implies I'm putting knowledge into my kids' brains or that I'm doing some of the work for them. But you came up with a term I love as well. And all of these terms can be useful, but I thought this term was really enlightening. So tell us what this term is and what it means.
Yeah. So I also love mentor, guide, helper, support, all these ways. I think they're really a powerful shift from maybe a traditional model of parenting or maybe how we grew up in parenting. And I realized that for me, I need to think a little more creatively because if I get stuck in too much binary, wrong, right, one way or this other way, it limits my relationship with my kids. And my goal is to expand my relationship with my kids. And so in order to expand that relationship, I took on this model of, reminding myself, I am a creative collaborator. That is my role here. And part of our relationship building is, does this increase my connection with my kid and increase our relationship of trust and communication, or does it decrease? And I found that some of my old thoughts around parenting were more decreasing that connection. And if I want expansion and if I want this trusting relationship, which has bumps along the way, right? I'm definitely not an expert in being a creative collaborator, and I'm learning all the time. And every time I center in that. Also, I do think the idea of creative collaborator has some sense of like humility. Like I'm not the only one in charge here, right? That they have this capacity in them already, that they're on this kind of journey of becoming, and I get to collaborate with them on that.
That's beautiful.
Thank you. And I do think the word creative also makes room for mistakes, right? That it's like the creative process is never perfect, right? Creativity isn't perfect. It's kind of the opposite
messy.
of that, right? It's so messy. It's colorful. It like drips off the side, right? Like it's juicy, it's delicious. And then sometimes it's not, and you kind of go back and forth. And so creativity, using that word gives me permission also, like I'm going to mess this up sometimes. And then my role is repair. Like how human of me, right? To engage in something. And so yeah, it's an experiment. Yeah, for sure.
But then you are modeling that for your children that, hey, it's okay to experiment.
Yeah.
That's what life is about. You have your whole lives to learn and figure it out. So let's experiment with some things here. And then it dispels any anxiety that, are you where you need to be right now?
Right.
Because life is just a great experiment, or any fear of failure, falling behind or failure.
Yeah, those words really don't work with the creative collaborative model. It doesn't fit in and it doesn't match. I also think with the creative collaborator, there's this sense of curiosity. Like I'm coming with curiosity here. I'm not going to pretend like I know all the answers, right? I'm not the wisest person in the room when I'm sitting with my
Mm-hmm.
kids, right? I'm one wise
Mm-hmm.
person and they also are a wise person.
Yes.
How empowering.
Shinichi Suzuki said um, that many people have said, "Why do kids love you so much? Is it because
Mm,
you love them?" And he said, "Everyone loves children. I respect children as my teachers." And so that's another powerful shift in thinking that aligns
yeah.
with what you're talking about is you can love a child and not respect them as your teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But how empowering to say, "Hey, I'm learning from you too." And
Mm.
especially when you both are exploring something, learning about something that you don't know.
Yeah.
And so you're learning together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's going to come up all the time in parenting, whether we have that kind of lens or not, right? I think there is this idea, okay, I'm a parent, I know stuff now, right? And so I should know things. There's a pressure to get things right. We're looking at, we cannot help but have our past experience of how we were parented as some kind of a framework, whether it was a great framework or not, it is part of our experience. So part of it is kind of analyzing, okay, which part of those things worked for me and which didn't? What am I going to carry forward? What do I need to just leave behind? Do I want to plant some new things? And what does that look like in a way to say, I get to decide what this looks like and I get to change. I'm not going to be the same. I'm not the same parent. And my kids, your oldest kids are like, oh, we didn't get to whatever to your youngest kids. This is a common experience in most households. I think this statement happens a lot in my house. So my oldest is 17, my youngest is 8. And I'll just say, yeah, I'm a different mom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm a
Yeah.
different mom now. And there's no way for me not to be, truly. And not just how, we're doing things in the house, but my outlook on life is different now
Yeah.
as a 45-year-old mother than a
Yes.
35-year-old mother, 25-year-old mother. Right.
We are different people now than we were
Yeah.
then. Yeah.
Right.
Because we're growing up too.
Yes. Right. Because we're also being creative collaborators with ourselves. How
Mm-hmm.
am I going to approach this day as a whole person myself?
Oh, that's so beautiful. So tell us the story of your son, your 17-year-old wanted to do this humanitarian project and how you approached it as a creative collaborator.
Okay. I will say this experience kind of tapped on some insecurities for me, which a lot of parenting does. And so I think acknowledging that is like, yeah, we're going to get tapped on. And so how do we kind of manage that? But yeah, my 17-year-old came to me and said, hey, my buddy is involved in this humanitarian group and it's a 9-month commitment for regular service. And then we're going to go somewhere around the world. And I was like, oh, okay. And my true initial inside response was like a little bit of fear. How is this going to change his time commitment? He's already really busy. How much is this going to cost? Kind of wondering how much do I have to take on for this? It sounds like a pretty big deal. I remember wanting to do something like that when I was his age, and I didn't feel very supported. So that energy was kind of just sitting with me. And so then I took a deep breath and I thought, okay, if I'm a creative collaborator here and if I'm going to be curious, what does that look like? And so instead of maybe putting all of my lens on him, these are all the things I'm worried about, right? Instead of that, which isn't a bad thing. There are important things to have questions about. But I thought, what if I just pause and let him know where I can be a helper here? So I said, okay, this is new. I want to learn more about this. Can you do some research? Right? Because he had very little information for me, right? Do a little research. I would love to know more about this. And then you keep me posted, right? Like I'm going to let you take this wherever you want to. And kind of thinking maybe he'll drop this in a couple of weeks. And also maybe he'll engage more with it. I don't know. But I wasn't going to push him one way. I decided not to push him one way or the other. And I decided to like my fears and insecurities about what this might look like and implications might be, especially for kind of what his plans are after high school. He already has some pretty specific goals. And so I was kind of worried about that. So if you're a creative collaborator, you can have worries. And how human of us to have our job can be, let me hold on to that because that gives me information about things I need to know. And that's not really his experience. His experience doesn't need to include whatever I'm worried about. Right. That's not my job to put that on him. That is my job to manage and feel it, feel the discomfort of it. And so I was really cautious with myself with this to think about, okay, I do have worries. They're valid. That makes sense. I don't have to get rid of my worries. In fact, getting rid of my worries is the wrong idea, right? Because then I'm not even involved at all emotionally. So I said, how about this? You're in charge and I'll be the helper. Dad and I will be the helpers. And so you are going to let us know what we need to know. And I'm going to ask you some questions along the way just so we can make sure we understand what's going on. And instead of shutting him down, which is probably what my initial statement might have done, even though it would have been still kind of open and curious, I would have been bringing my fears to that conversation. So he brought back new information. This is what I learned. We meet once a month in this location. This is the money that's due. These are some fundraising options. This is what I'm thinking about. And I'm like, okay, yeah, keep thinking about that. I can't remember what his very first fundraising idea was. And he kept mulling over. And then we were actually out with some friends and he came up to me and he said, okay, I just did the math. If I start a bread subscription program where I've taught all my kids how to make a very easy, like artisan bread recipe. And he'd been making it for a while and like giving to friends or taking to events. And so he said, what if I make bread and people pay every week for a fresh loaf of bread that I can deliver to them? And I'm like, okay, tell me more about that, right? What days do you think would work for you in your school schedule, right? Because this kid goes to an early morning class before school every other day. He stays after for theater. He's involved in this Irish Roots band that they perform in other places. There's all these things he's doing, right? He's got some other leadership. He's president of student council. So I'm thinking, what days would be good bread days for you? The old me would be like, I don't know how this will work. How are you even, how is this? You're too busy and I don't want to be making the bread, putting my worries. So he came up with a plan and I said, as a helper, do you want me to help with the flyer or do you want, I just gave options. Where can I be a helper here? So I helped him make a flyer. He started, and so now he has about 10 people that regularly subscribe to his monthly bread subscription. He gets up probably 4 a.m. on Mondays and Thursdays to start his bread loaves for those days. Those are the delivery days, except if he has some extra, then he might do Saturday. Another thing that I thought was really creative and fun that he did was one Saturday, he just got up and made like 8 loaves of bread and then just went up to some neighborhoods near us where we don't really know the families there and just knocked on the door and said, hey, I'm planning this humanitarian trip. We're raising money to go to Nepal. We're going to, this is the goal and this is the plan. And would you like a loaf of fresh bread to contribute to my process? And I thought I was so amazed that his brain was just going. It was not hindered by me. I could have said some things that shifted that for him, right?
So much character development.
Oh my gosh. Character development, self-motivation. And then this self-trust idea that like, okay, my mom is saying words that means she trusts me, right? When I said, you're in charge, let me be a helper. That is the opposite of what a lot of modern Western parenting is, which is, no, don't do that. That's not safe. That's going to be too expensive. That's too much, right? And sometimes those things are true, right? Sometimes it is too much. Sometimes it is too expensive or too whatever. And they can figure that out themselves. Right? They can decide, I am too busy with this. So there was an opportunity that he had to participate in another group of performers. And so he was weighing, do I have time to add this other thing in? And I really wanted to say something, but I didn't. I just said, yeah, let me know what you decide. Let me know what you decide and how I can help. And so he actually decided not to he actually said yes to them and then said no, which I love that. I think that's a really important skill to develop. Yeah. Sometimes we're eager to say yes. I do this all the time. And then we kind of shut ourselves down from saying, oh, actually, I realize this doesn't work for me. Right. And so I love that that's part of the skill building that's happening.
So I had this aha moment recently. I mean, I think I knew it intuitively, but for the first time really articulated it, put it into words, is that failing is a powerful discovery. That is a discovery. Even if you're trying to figure out the solution to a problem that does have one right answer, that every time you get it wrong, that's a discovery. That is a powerful learning experience. And when you do figure out the right way, it's more powerful, it's more impactful, and you understand better why that's the right, whether there is one right answer or whether it's just you've figured out the best path for you.
Yes.
And then when they get that wrong, they feel the wrongness of it and they understand why that was not the right choice for me,
Mm.
more than if their parent just said, you shouldn't do that. And I'll explain why. Like, I'm going to give
Yeah.
you a reason why you shouldn't do it, but I'm going to stop you from trying it because
Yeah.
I know, and you should trust me that that's the wrong decision.
Right.
And there's a lot of trust in that too. Like, I trust that I'm comfortable with making mistakes. I'm
Yes.
comfortable with failure, and I trust you to figure it out.
And I'm always going to be here, right? I'm
Mhm.
not leaving you alone in this, but I'm not going to take this on for you, right? And yeah, Sandy, you were saying?
It's just such a disservice that we do to our kids when we tell them the journey instead of allowing them to experience the journey because they don't learn anything. We think that we
Yeah.
have all this wisdom, so we want to protect them from the failure or from wasting their time. But that is like it's the experience, right? It's that
Yeah.
growth that they get from that actually develops their knowledge, not us telling them something that doesn't develop their knowledge. What I think is really amazing about kids is they're so fearless. They just don't know fear until we teach them to be afraid. And so
Yes.
when we interject, whatever you could have said about him going to do the loaves of bread, and we don't even have to say words that are fear words. Like they can sense our
Yes.
fear.
Yes.
Like saying
Yes.
something like, well, how do you make sure that you're safe? And what if, and what would you do? We can imply all of this fear on them. And so taking our fear, and so hard to not, but often we just take this fear that we have and we instill it in them
Yeah.
when their natural instinct will have that, and trusting them to know that that fear will be there when they need it and not to give them more, because we want kids, we want them to be brave. And
Yeah.
otherwise that curiosity is hampered, can be so hampered by fear. And that's the last thing we want to give our kids, is a gift of fear, right?
Yeah.
And so I love the way you just let him own it so that he can figure that out himself and be develop into a better future person, instead of thinking that we can give our experience to them. We can't give our experience to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say jumping to results is the waste of time.
Yes.
That's the biggest waste of time. One of you said we feel like we don't want to waste their time by failing, but actually that's the best use of their time.
Yeah.
They'll make
Yeah, that's where growth is.
more progress and growth sooner. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some integration that happens, right? We can tell our stories. I think parents telling their stories of risk and challenge and triumph and empowerment and loss, right? All of that storytelling has high value. The challenge is sometimes we mix up the timing of when we tell those stories, right?
Ooh.
If our kids are telling us, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing, and it makes sense because it's going to tap on our sense of something from our story, right? And we tend to use our story as a response in that moment. So our stories are high value. In that moment, our job is, I am a curious and creative collaborator. So a collaborator isn't like, my story, my story, my story. A collaborator is like, tell me more. Right. And then tell your stories. Absolutely tell your stories. They're critical in the family system, and they're not, we just miss the timing. When we add them in when they're starting something or exploring some kind of possible risk taking or some autonomy experience, that is not the time for our story. In that moment, it might be in the realm, right? But just not right in that moment.
Right.
Love that. What an aha moment. I'm taking notes, just so you know.
Yay.
I love. We spoke to Christy a while ago, and that was her experience, was those same words that you're using, and I've been trying to use them more, is just tell me more. Because we think we know exactly what's going on in our kid's mind. Somehow we think we're a mind reader, but we often don't. And so those words of like, tell me more, like that curiosity, and then a pause and some silence there before you just jump right in and tell them all your wisdom. Tell me more. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like I've really increased my capacity for that since learning about how to be a therapist, because that is often a question I'm asking in the therapy space. Tell me more about that, right?
As I'm thinking about this epidemic we have of teens right now, like they just lack purpose. in a way, we've stripped away their autonomy, given them entertainment, and there's
Uh-huh.
depression and mental health. And
Uh-huh.
because they don't have a sense of purpose or a reason to do something.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I don't have any great words of wisdom on it, except I see the way in which you approached this gave him his own purpose, which drove him,
Uh-huh.
like that natural drive to act and create and grow because you didn't take it from him. And I wonder how we can just do that even better. How do we not
Yeah.
take that?
Mhm.
And maybe your training and your schooling has you maybe have some insider information
On
on
how to
that.
do that. I think I will say a lot of therapists that work with kids and teens would like to work with parents instead.
Ah,
Does that make sense? So,
yeah.
kids can do really well in therapy. There's a lot of good work that can happen there, but they're going back into the environment.
Yes, and parents think this is the child's problem
Yes.
and they need to be
Ah,
fixed.
Yes, yes. That's a very common energy and it makes a lot of sense. And I understand that. And as a parent, I've felt some of that too. And I'm not saying don't take your kids to therapy because my kids have all done therapy and it has been very good for them. I also recommend let's get some therapy for you too, because the environment in which these kids are experiencing that feeling of, maybe powerlessness or I don't know who I am or I don't know where I fit in here. These are very developmentally appropriate explorations. That makes sense. That is the question of their brains and their experience is where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Who am I? We want them to ask those questions. The maybe some of the pieces that we want to kind of lean into is what can we do as parents to just give them rich opportunities to explore that safely? And that's going to look different family to family, but yeah, highly recommend some good because we come with our messy things. We're all
yeah.
it's kind of unfortunate sometimes I think why am I parenting when I have so many messy things, right? That I'm working through myself, right? For my whole life. This isn't an ending. There's not an ending of
Yeah.
healing and growth and change. And I think I'd like to get rid of that way of thinking. And I would like to add in this new way of thinking,
Mm,
right? So some cognitive flexibility that is tricky and not very praised in Western culture. The capacity to hold two things at once, the capacity to be like,
mm,
my kid's having a hard time and I might contribute to it a little bit, right? That's a really
mhm.
uncomfortable thought for a lot of parents, and that makes sense. And so then we're missing this capacity to sit with discomfort. This idea that discomfort isn't danger, it's kind of
Yeah.
a prerequisite to change or transformation,
Mhm.
self-awareness, self-trust, autonomy, all of these kind of principles we're talking about. It's really difficult to have a true growth experience without some discomfort. That's really not
Like
likely.
you can't. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not gonna
Oh,
ha
yeah. That's like a principle of growth.
Mhm.
and so how do I feel discomfort
Mhm,
safely? This idea that I can safely do this. I don't like it. It's not my favorite
mhm,
feeling. I don't wanna feel it all the time. And, okay, I'm feeling it. Okay, I'm now growing
mhm.
my capacity to feel this.
Since we're talking
Yeah.
about this discomfort,
Mhm.
disappointment, honest development, a few years ago, you realized you value your kids' ability to tolerate discomfort even more than their happiness or success.
Yes.
So, what led to that realization and explain why?
Okay. So I was going through a really very transformative and very uncomfortable season of my personal life. And it was really shocking to me that I had done everything that I thought I should do to make a certain outcome be reality. And that wasn't happening anymore. It was like, what is happiness? What is joy? What is connection? It was a really dark time. And I started to realize the only way for me to get through this dark experience is to be okay with the uncertainty of discomfort. And the more I leaned into that, the more I could find myself again. And the more I found myself again, the more I could experience these drops of hope and kind of energy around, oh, I'm going to pivot this so I can take care of myself in this way, or I'm going to pivot this so I can parent in this way. I'm going to pivot this to enhance my relationships in this way. And so what I was doing was I was going from trusting an outside plan for me to
Mhm.
trusting my own inner wisdom. But in between that experience was really uncomfortable and it hit me. I remember where I was and I thought, that's it. More important than anything else, I want my kids to understand that it is okay to hold and sit in discomfort. It's not going to obliterate them, right? Because it can feel a little bit like, I am not going to survive this really hard thing,
Mhm.
right? And they're going to experience. That was the thing too that I was like, our kids are going to experience hard things that we cannot imagine right now as we're just raising them in this part of their life experience. I want them to have the skill of knowing how to tolerate discomfort. And I will say also, this is different for everyone. For some people, tolerating discomfort involves, I need to move my body more. In order to make it through this really vulnerable experience, I need to move my body every day. And I do recommend moving bodies through all vulnerable, but for some people, that's like the thing. Other people are like, I
Mhm.
need to talk to all my friends. I need to gather my closest team and I need them to hear me and I need to be heard and I need all of this. For some people, it's music. For some people, it's art. For some people, it's writing. For some people, it's taking a break and stepping back from whatever is going on, right? There's a lot of strategies for this. What I'm hoping that
Mhm.
my kids develop is the capacity to know what theirs is. For me, when I'm going through a hard time, when I have these vulnerably rich experiences, I know where to turn to. I know what I need. I also at this time was listening to a book by Glennon Doyle. She had also this kind of like, I went through this really hard thing and I learned these big messages. And then she told her kids, your job throughout your life is to disappoint as many people as possible, as many people as it takes to avoid disappointing yourself. And I will say, the first time I heard this, I was in my kitchen, I was washing dishes, my littlest was on my back
Ooh.
strapped on, and I thought, what? And I didn't like it. I did not like that idea because we are kind of trained not to disappoint other people.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. And that felt a little prickly to me. And I thought, why is that prickly? Why is that prickly? Why is that uncomfortable? And I just kind of simmered and simmered and simmered until finally I was like, that's it. That's part of this discomfort. That's part of this. I can tolerate discomfort safely is sometimes that means other people will be disappointed in me. But if I am not disappointed in myself, then I'm going to be okay. Right. That's a huge shift.
Yes, in Christianity, there's an order to the commandments that number one is to love God and number two is to love your neighbor. And to
Mhm.
me, you could replace to love God first. I wouldn't say self, but I would say truth. And so
Mhm.
if you're aligning yourself with truth,
Mhm.
if you're disappointing other people, this, idea of loving your neighbor, if you think of it as pleasing your neighbor or, your kids
Mm,
or whoever,
sure.
is that the most important thing you can do is align yourself with truth. And then I don't know if that's making any sense or if that
Yeah.
does not resonate with you. And you can be honest if it doesn't.
No, and I think knowing what truth is a part of growing up, right?
Mhm.
How am I aligning with some true thing? And it might be a
Right.
very religious model and it might be outside of that system. And when Sandy's talking about purpose, that's part of it, right? That
Mhm.
there is something about me that is bigger than just this day, right? Than
Mhm.
just this hard thing that I'm experiencing. And that I also think this capacity to tolerate discomfort just gives this wisdom to pivot, right? If I can tolerate discomfort, then I can change something about what I'm
Mhm.
doing or not doing and to align with that truth and to say, okay, am I disappointing myself or am I trying to appease some system outside myself?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right?
I
So
love
this is kind of
that.
that kind of orienting towards self-trust. If I'm orienting towards, am I disappointing myself? Where's my truth? Where's my grounding place? Okay, I'm learning to trust myself because I keep readjusting back to this, whatever that center is, whatever that purpose place is. And then we can be honest with ourselves. One of the
Mhm.
tricky things is, you can read articles about or you could talk to a teen. Teens will be dishonest when they think that they might disappoint someone else. Not an uncommon scenario. Yeah, so I mean, it's adaptive. The brain is trying to stay safe. And if the teen brain, one of the major, most important things is I need to belong and I need to be safe here. But something I'm thinking, doing, wondering about, or curious about might disappoint or tap on something for my parent or for, something around me, then I am going to not be completely honest here. Right? I'm not going to
Mhm.
share the whole story because my parents can't handle me being honest about this. Right.
Mhm.
Well, that's
And so
uncomfortable.
That's really
Yeah.
uncomfortable. It is really
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And so, yep, that's so, I have my daughter has a friend that says regularly when grades come out, "Oh, my mom's going to kill me if I'm not making this grade," right? And I mean, that's an over exaggeration. Of course, that statement is over exaggeration, but the what she's saying is there is a consequence when if I'm not succeeding, have this kind of success story. And so I don't know how I'm going to approach this because maybe I'm not matching this expectation. And so then my
Even
daughter
if it's
said,
just showing disappointment.
right.
I'm
Because
disappointed in you.
because the teen brain is working so hard to belong. This is why those relationships are so important. Their friends are so important, trying to find their place, right? So they're really, if I don't belong, I'm not okay, is what the brain is saying at that age. Later, we're like, get over that. We're like, I don't need to belong. I'm who I am, right? But this developmental,
Okay.
these stages have to happen. So my daughter said, I'm so glad that you're not worried about that. You're not going to stress out if my grade is a little bit different. And then, and I'm not going to stress out about that. We're going to make sure that you have what you need to learn the things you want to learn and then figure out some, new ways as we need to go. But when we start hiding parts of ourselves, we kind of limit our development. And so that I think is part of what we might see sometimes for some teens when it's like they're, some of those depression symptoms can be related, not always, but can be related to this sense of like, I have to hide part of myself because my parent can't handle the honesty of who I am or what I'm going through right now.
Wow.
So letting kids know we can handle their big feelings is a big pivot. It's a big job. Again, coming back to that, I am a creative collaborator. That means I want my kids to know their big feelings and their processes are safe with me. And it doesn't mean it doesn't mean I don't get to have a reaction. I might have a reaction, and that's for me to talk to with my friends or my therapist or my partner, right? It's okay. Please engage with the feelings that you're having that are prickly around whatever. But it's not our job to put that on them.
Because there's been many a moments
Right.
when I've sat there listening to my child that my inner voice is saying, be cool, be cool, be cool.
Yeah.
Be
Yes.
cool.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yes. That's it. That's it. Yes. Yes.
Like,
yes.
just stay quiet,
Absolutely.
be cool. No
Yes.
reaction.
Yeah.
Just
and
listen.
it doesn't, yeah. And it is a good message. You can kind of make it know your brain. There's something here I need to process through, right? I'm worried about this, or this tapped on a fear that I have, or this reminded me of this insecurity that I have, or this is really different. I never thought I would be having a conversation like this with my child, right? And so I need some new skills in order to show up here.
That takes humility.
I've a long time subscribed to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to get comfortable with allowing your kids to be uncomfortable. Like, I can handle
really
my
is.
own discomfort, but I love this individual. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. But if we realize how much value it's brought into our own life to be able to experience that discomfort and be okay with that and the growth that comes from it, but we have to also pass that along to our kids. And so I've seen so many times they're crying, they're upset. Like, how can I fix this really quick? How do I stop them from crying? How do I make them happy? How do I fix this? Instead of just allowing them the time to be uncomfortable and process it and find the solution themselves.
Right. And so two things. One, when you're talking about like, oh, my kid is crying, I want to solve this for them. We want to make sure that there's a distinction here. Our job still is to co-regulate with them. Our job, even we might not solve it, but we can sit by them. We might not be able to fix the thing, but we can hold their hand and be like, I'm right here with you. Right. Or leave them a note or have a journal that you're sharing back and forth with them. We're not leaving them alone in their discomfort. We're just allowing it to be present and saying, yeah, this is heavy. I've felt this before too.
Okay, so this reminds me of recently reading a book in which a Jewish family sits Shiva after the passing of a family member. And I was really struck by this practice. And again, like you said, everyone sits with the discomfort in different ways. But this shows sitting Shiva is a good example of a culture that values sitting with the discomfort and not distracting themselves from it. Where they sit low, they wear torn clothing, they do not work, including cooking or cleaning, for a full week, and they sit with the grief. And they have, again, like you said, they have that support. They are surrounded by their family the entire 7 days. They typically keep their door unlocked and friends come in and offer their support and bring meals.
Yeah.
Whereas I think it's typical for us in our modern American culture to distract ourselves from the feelings.
Yeah, I really am curious about how you help kids trust themselves, because I think that's something that
Yeah.
we just don't intuitively know how to do. I mean, we've talked a little bit about that before, but how do you parent in a way that
Mhm.
they learn to trust their own instinct?
Mhm.
When we trust ourselves, we can make choices in alignment with ourselves because instead of looking for an outside authority, looking for what our friends are
Mm.
doing, et
Oh,
cetera,
the
et cetera.
disappointment, like that you don't
Yeah. Oh,
disappoint yourself. Like you have to
yeah.
know yourself and to not disappoint yourself.
Yes.
But how do you parent in a way so that your
Mhm.
kids learn what that is, like how to trust
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah, and I will just say I'm always flailing at all of the parenting things and I don't have it all figured out and we're still learning all the ways. And self-trust increases when a child feels like their parent trusts their inner wisdom. So, as a parent, when we approach them in a way that's like, "Tell me more about that." Right? Then we're saying, "You are wise. You have
Okay.
wisdom that I want to learn about." And that takes practice, and we're not going to get it right all the time, and that's okay. That's okay. And then we
Mhm.
get to practice what? Repair. Repair also supports self-trust. Every time we come to them and say, "Hey, I noticed that the way I approach that is not how I want to approach that. Can I tell you what I wish I would have done?" And then they get this sense of like, "Oh, my parent trusts me enough to apologize and then give me a framework. This is what I wish I would have done." And so then they start to gain this self-trust of like, because probably the child left feeling like that didn't feel great, but I don't know what to do about it because my parent acted like that was a normal response, right? And for us to
Mhm.
come back and say, "Hey, you probably felt something about that." That encouraged that, "Oh yeah, I felt that." And they saw that I felt that. So we're kind of scaffolding around that self-trust and then letting them take safe risks in safe ways,
Like
all of
climbing
those
trees?
things, like climbing trees. So when we lived in Minnesota, my kids were little and they were climbing this very, very tall evergreen tree. And I just decided at that point, those two little boys, I was like, "You can climb as far as you want, as long as you can get down by yourself." And I like to say that it was because I was trying to build the scaffolding of self-trust, but honestly, I did not want to come after them. I didn't want to call someone to come after them, and I had a baby that I was dealing with. So it was very, very practical for me to say, "I'm not coming after you." And the more that we experience things like that, where I was like, "You can climb on that as long as you know how to get down." So actually, this is interesting because now Jackson is a climber. So he spent the summer working in Moab, Utah as a climbing guide. And it was an incredible experience for him. So
Wow.
now he has all these new skills, which is amazing to me, blows my mind. And so recently we live near um, a mountain ridge and there's not a trail. So it's not something people are normally climbing up that ridge. It's very spiky and very rocky. And so just a couple of weeks ago, Jackson said, "I want to climb the ridge." And so inside, because it is a dangerous place. There have been people that have had dangerous experiences on that ridge. So inside I'm like, "Okay, I'm feeling some uncertainty here, but I want to be a creative collaborator." So I said, "Tell me what your plan would be." And he said, "Well, I think I would go in the morning, mid-morning, so it's not too cold, but it's not too sunny, and the sun won't go down while I'm up there." And I'm like, "Okay." And I said, "I wonder who you might go with." So I'm not telling him who to go with yet, although I might have if he had a hard time coming up with an idea. I said, "I think I'll go with my buddy who also was a climbing guide in Moab." So that was going to be a thing. If he suggested someone else, I would have said, "I need you to go with someone who's also an expert climber." Right? Just because of I wouldn't say that for all climbs, but for this one, yes. So he said, "I can go with this buddy." And he told me the time of day. And I said, "Okay, what do you know about the landscape?" And he said, "Okay." So he pulled up Google Earth and got the lay of the land. Where's the ridge lines? Where are the shrubbery? Where are there some of the rocky places that then have like a drop off, right? He looked at it really thoroughly. He showed it to me. "Hey, this is what I'm seeing here." Inside, I'm telling you, I was like, "Okay, you have some expertise. You are going with someone else with some expertise. You have equipment. You're showing me the lay of the land." I said, "I want you to text me when you leave and text me when you get back," because I was going to be out and about that day, so I wasn't going to be, around. And he was like, "Okay." And one of his siblings was like, "Oh, can I go?" And he was like, "I need to do this myself first before we bring someone who's a little bit less expert." So I appreciated that. And anyway, I held some nervousness in my heart during the day while also acknowledging he's learning how to trust himself and he's learning that I can trust him too. And I'm learning how to trust him too, to be honest. But we made sure there was some safety protocol in place. He also had in his backpack like a light device that can shine so you could, let someone know if you needed some help, right? We can see from our house this ridge. also. So
Mhm.
there was that. Anyway, he did the thing. It took lots of hours. It was so hard. He got these beautiful photos of the valley, of the rocks. He has this one where he's sitting on the ledge that looks incredible, right? Looks like a movie scene. And so I asked him about it. He came back and I'm like, oh my gosh, how was it? And he said, that is the hardest climb I've ever done. And I might not do it again, but I'm really glad that I did it.
Wow.
Like I could have easily, even 5 years ago, would have been like, I don't think so.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And instead I was like, tell me more because I'm trying to be a creative collaborator. And again, I'm not going to do, if we had my kids come in, they'd be like, she does not do that all the time. And that's true, right? Because I'm still a learner. And that's another
Yeah.
stance that I really love for myself is I am a learner here too.
Mhm.
It's okay when I get it wrong as a parent. I'm learning, I'm expanding, I'm aligning. And every time I do something that I'm like, oh, I want to do that different as a parent, then I get to go back. Like there is no time that is not appropriate to come back to our kid and say, hey, I want to let you know, I wish I would have done that different. There's never a time that isn't
Yeah.
appropriate.
I think even, as I've looked back at parenting and watched the relationship between me and my oldest and my husband and my oldest, and there was a time, where he went back to her and he said, you know what? Like this is years later. I
Yes.
just want to say I didn't do that the way that I wish I would have. Like if I could redo that, and like you said, it's never too late.
Never too late.
Mm.
It is,
And the healing that happened from that was incredible.
man.
Mm.
Yes. And I see a lot of adults, young adults, middle-aged adults, older age adults that wish they had a parent that could do that, right? I wish my parent could just say, I wish I would have done that different. How can I show up for you now? I mean, I can't even I can think of no more healing statement than that, right? And in our relationships with other people and even our relationships with ourselves. I mean, we can do that with ourselves. Hey, I wish I would have done that early parenting differently. And I'm glad I get to change now.
Acknowledging it to yourself.
Yeah.
You were like so therapist-y.
No.
I love it.
That's a
I know
good
in my
thing.
head I'm like,
I wish.
so when do I book my first appointment?
Yeah. Yes, right. It does feel so good to, again, kind of full circle this, right? Like that I started as a doula and then an educator and then decided, oh my gosh, I can educate my kids. We can do this holistically. We can ask questions differently. We can experience this in a way that feels a little more fluid and a little less boxed up, right? And then going back to school to become a therapist, same thing. I get to do a work that is not boxed up. People come in and I'm like, what do we got, right? It's different all the time. What do we need today? Tell me more about that. Can we feel discomfort safely? Let's be curious collaborators together. See what happens.
If this podcast was helpful for you, please leave us a review and share with a friend.
Until next time, start with stories and everything else will follow.
You can learn more about our other education projects at angelselda.com and wonderwelllearning.com.